right, welcome back to Always Moving Forward. I just want to thank everybody who's been supporting us and showing up every week to see our videos. I just wanted to just to remind you guys that as you're watching the videos and you're visiting our site, just to go ahead and just hit that subscribe button for us. And then also as you're watching these videos, if this videos mean or take on some meaning for you and it's helping you. Smash that like button. Let us know. Also, leave a comment. Tell us what it is that you guys are getting out of this, the interviews, things that you're learning, and then finally, we want you to share these videos as well, because the whole purpose of our show is to help people find and follow their purpose. So, everybody has a purpose. Everybody, I say it all the time. You're uniquely designed with a purpose. So, share this with somebody so that, we can help encourage and inspire them. All right, guys. Thank you. All right. Welcome back to Always Moving Forward. Today, I have a very special guest. This is Russell Kerbow. Russell is actually Judge James Kerbow's dad. So, James and I kind of talked about his dad was a chief of police and his mom was a judge. So today we're going to get to learn a little bit more about James's dad. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Parks. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, I appreciate you being on.
Absolutely.
So you were the chief of police for Louisville for 13 years?
No, it was actually 11.
11. Okay, 11 years. Okay. And then you just recently retired?
Well, 2018.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, he was saying, and then you and your wife retired about the same time?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was fortunate that I retired at the end of August and she was able to finish out her term through that year. And so January 1 of 2019, she was free.
All right. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So, we'll get started. Go ahead and we'll introduce yourself and tell us kind of where you were born and raised and what life was like growing up.
Well, thanks again for having me on. Can't imagine why anybody would want to hear from an old retired police chief about anything, but I appreciate you asking me to be on. I grew up most of my life in Louisville. We had lived in the Dallas area, my parents had and everything, and sort of migrated north to Louisville back in 1967.
Okay.
I was 10 years old back then, but then I've been here since then.
Wow. Wow.
So it's been a great community for me. I know my parents really liked Louisville when they were moving around and trying to decide where they were going to set down roots for sure.
Right.
My dad had a cousin that lived in Louisville, and we would frequently come to Louisville and visit.
Oh, wow.
And so I think they got exposed to Louisville, and it reminded them of their hometowns.
Right.
They were both from East Texas, and kind of reminded them, of the small town feel. And,
right.
And really, a lot of people say that about Louisville now, that even though it's a big city of 120,000+ people, there's still a lot of small town feel to it.
Right.
Especially if you're over in the old town section of Louisville.
Right.
So I was fortunate enough to grow up in Louisville and graduate Louisville High School, and did a lot of odd jobs and things, when I was a teenager, mostly in the grocery business.
Oh, wow.
I worked at the Howdy Doody convenience store, which I think they originated in Denton.
Right.
And I think we had 3 locations in Louisville once upon a time.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think there's any of those that have survived the time.
Now.
But I worked there some, racking bottles and, doing odd jobs around the place.
Right.
And then went to work for Safeway as a kind of a stock boy, and then moved up to checker. And, so I did a lot of stuff with them through graduation from the high school. And then when I worked for 7-Eleven, I was a store manager for the Southern Corporation in Louisville.
Okay.
And then the bug bit me about trying law enforcement.
Okay.
So I'm working at the convenience store,
right.
And a couple of buddies of mine that I knew from school were police officers.
Okay.
And they would come in on their breaks or to get a soda or something like that. And they were telling me, they were trying to talk me into joining the police reserve program.
Okay.
Which at that time we had a volunteer police force that you could do some minimal training, and then that would authorize you to be able to ride with another police officer while they're on duty.
Right. And
that gave you the authority to act on behalf of the city.
Okay.
And so, I thought, I'm 20 some odd years old.
Right.
The chance to be in a police car.
Right.
Who
Right.
wouldn't jump at the chance?
Right.
So I did, and man, I just fell in love with the job. It
Oh,
was
wow.
it was really cool.
Right.
I think I went to reserve school in September of 1977, and man, I just knew I loved it.
Right.
It was what I was meant to do.
Right.
And so the following year, I applied for one of the openings they had in May of '78, and I was hired.
Oh, wow.
In fact, actually, I was talking about this with some of my buddies from school this morning. I actually took a pay cut from 7-Eleven because I was a store manager.
Oh, really?
So I was making pretty decent money.
Right.
And then, go to the police department and, go down to $835 a month.
Oh, wow.
And I was living out on my own, with a roommate in an apartment there in Louisville. But, so it was a little tight.
Right.
But it was absolutely a job that I loved.
Cool.
Chance to be outside all day,
Yeah.
patrolling, and helping people. It's not, police work is not all about, the gunfights and chases and stuff that
Right.
you see on TV.
Right.
There's a whole lot of basically boredom stuff that goes on in between that stuff.
Right.
And throughout a career even.
Yeah.
And so to me it was all about helping people, and I never wanted to do this anywhere else but Louisville because it was my hometown.
Right.
I felt like, the community, had a large part to do with my raising and,
Right.
growing me into a young man that, I needed to give back.
Right.
And so that's really what kind of inspired me to want to be a police officer.
Wow. So I have 2 questions on that.
Okay.
So, first of all, one of the things I think too about being a police officer where you grew up, whenever I talk to people, especially people in the inner city, who try to kind of shun away from police, the police department, I tell them that I believe the best people to police a particular city are the people who grew up in that city, because you're familiar with that city. You grew up with the people there. So if you did do a traffic stop, most likely the person that you're stopping, you probably already know.
Very, very high likelihood.
Right. And so, and then, because it's different when you have like, say someone from Iowa come in, to like Oak Cliff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's, you're throwing this guy from, a totally different environment into an environment that they're not familiar with.
Well, it's 2 different cultures too.
Right.
So
Yeah. So that's one of the things that when I talk to people about police and being police officers, especially in the inner city, I'm like, if you are looking for reform, everybody's talking about police reform.
Sure.
Go be a part of it. Go
Absolutely.
join the force in your city.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. I mean, it's kind of funny that you say that, because there are those 2 schools of thought.
Right.
That people like doing that where they grew up,
Right.
where they're from, and then some people go 180 degrees.
Right.
They don't want to police in a city where they actually live,
Yeah.
or where they grew up. In fact, it's kind of funny that almost nowadays nobody lives where they police.
Yeah.
And that's totally against the principles of community policing.
Right.
That Sir Robert Peel created back in in England back in the day. He believed that the people are the police and the police are the people.
Right.
They should be one and the same.
Right.
Should be somebody from the neighborhood or somebody from the small community that should police the other people.
Right.
You would have more respect for that person if if it was somebody that was from your neighborhood versus somebody that moves in from another state.
Right.
So I think that is a perfect alignment for what we should have in our communities.
Right. And I think you see a difference too in
think so, too.
all the situations that we're looking at now. I mean, because one, it's about community, and then 2, I mean, you just know the guy. You know the people, so you know who the bad guys are in the city, and you know who the good guys are in the city.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You know what part of town that needs your help the most.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I was thinking of. But and then how long were you a police officer for?
Well, I mean, total just a little over 40 years.
Oh, okay.
I was fortunate to be able to promote along the way, and,
Right.
and was appointed chief of police in 2007.
Okay.
My previous chief, I've only worked for one of the chief.
Oh, wow. Wow.
He was there for over 29 years, and most of it he started when I was a reserve whenever he came to Louisville. And great mentor, a great
Right.
teacher of law enforcement, and you know, we named the facility after him back when he retired in 2007.
Right.
That's why we call it the Steve H. McFadden Jr. Law Enforcement Center, because that's, you know, for him.
Okay.
Great guy, you know, great friend. And so, you know, I was appointed to take his place. Did that until 2018. So, you know, about 11 years or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. So during that time, you've seen a lot of changes in Louisville.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, when I was growing up in Louisville, population was right at 10,000 people.
Okay.
And so we've gone from that to, you know, especially with just the recent annexation of the Castle Hills development.
Right.
You know, we're 125, 130,000 people.
Yeah.
And it will continue to grow because much of that land out there has not yet been developed or habitated yet. So
right.
It'll be, we'll be 150,000 before terribly long.
Oh, wow.
I think a lot of the housing that I see going in nowadays in Louisville is more dense, and so that will add population as well.
Right.
So, anyway, to see it go from that size to what it is today, it's phenomenal to me.
Right.
And I think had I not been there all along the way, I probably would feel out of place.
Right.
You know, and I hear that from some of the friends of mine that I grew up with that, you know, they've moved off and they come back to Louisville and they don't recognize it.
Wow.
Totally understand that.
Yeah.
You know, roads have changed alignment and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, some of that stuff, even to me today, it's just not what I grew up knowing.
Right.
You know, so I still get a little turnaround in
Into
some places, you know.
Yeah, I've heard it's changed a lot. I talked to someone who said that everything from Maine going towards like Mill Street used to be just all grassland. It was like there was nothing there.
Yeah, everything west of the interstate was, you know, there was hardly any houses at all.
Yeah.
I know we moved in what was called the Lake City Edition, and that's that addition of homes that was just north of 121 Business,
right,
and west of the highway, south of Fox Avenue.
Okay, yeah.
So that was a new development back when I was growing up. Really nothing else west of the interstate much.
Right.
When they built the high school where it is now, back in 1969.
Wow. So Louisville High School,
Louisville High School,
main
the main campus. Yeah. Everybody thought the school board was nuts for building the school so far out of town. And can you imagine thinking of it today like that? I can't.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of everything right now.
It's
like,
right smack dab in the middle of everything. So they were very forward thinking, you know, in how they planned their schools and, you know, where they knew populations were going to grow.
Right. So when they first built it, that was all just like nothing around it?
Oh, yeah. There was so Main and Edmonds, where the Panda Express, I think, is on the north side, and like Chick-fil-A and all that kind of stuff, there was a barn that sat there forever, and it was nothing but pasture, you know, and it pretty much like that all the way out till you got to the school.
Wow, because now you got all the restaurants
over
there.
Part of Main Street was dirt road, you know, past I'm pretty sure past Valley Parkway.
Oh, wow. So there was nothing.
So it was really, same way with Fox Avenue. Fox Avenue was, you know, gravel up till you got to Edmonds, and then it was all dirt road, you know.
Wow.
So
now there's tons of apartments out that way.
Oh yeah, it's just not even anything like it was, you know, when I was growing up, to a degree anyway.
Right. So that leads me to the other question is, you know, seeing those changes all that time, how did that start affecting your job as a police officer? I mean, what kind of things did you start running into that, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, so transportation just in general changes the environment quite a bit. You know, I-35 went from, I think we were a 2-lane undivided highway to kind of what it is today.
Right.
And then you factor in, you know, 635 being invented, the George Bush Turnpike, all those things, that allowed a lot more mobility in the area. Same for the bad guys.
Right.
I remember seeing a significant change whenever the George Bush freeway went in, the toll road, because, you know, we started seeing an influx of criminals that would come in from places south of us.
Right.
You know, where they'd come up here and there were targets of opportunity all along the highway with, you know, cars they could break into and businesses and things.
Right.
And then they'd get back in the car,
take off,
hit the highway, and they're gone, you know.
Yeah.
So it makes it difficult on a local police department to deal with that kind of an issue.
Mm.
We would do special patrols down there and special task force to try to catch those guys and, bait cars and things like that.
Right.
And, eventually, I think the word got out that we were watching that area.
Right.
So then those guys, they go somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that from several chief of police that from the major cities.
Mm-hmm.
How the highways are like the high crime areas because it's, like you said, they can stop by, do whatever crime, jump right back up on the freeway and take off.
There was a group from Florida
Mm-hmm.
that would fly into DFW,
Oh wow.
steal rent cars from there, and then go and hit any little towns that they could to
Right.
do their crimes, and then run right back to the airport, get on a plane, and fly back.
Right.
There was a ring out of Florida that one of our detectives worked on that
Oh wow.
we were able to track down some property that that they had taken from the cars, and
Right.
it's just amazing how how fluid and how mobile the criminal element is.
Right.
So it's not just on foot or by car,
Right.
it's by airplane.
It just reminds me. I did a short period of time where I did some security at the Grapevine Mills Mall.
Okay.
So I was one of the supervisors there, and we had a group come in that was shoplifting that we caught, and when we went to their car, there were two separate groups. Well, it was one group, but they were in two separate vehicles.
Sure.
So one vehicle they had all the stuff that they had stolen, and the other is where everybody was riding in.
Okay.
So when we went to the car to identify this guy's car, they opened up the car. The car's full of shopping bags and from several different malls.
I'm sure.
Not just here, from Grapevine Mills, and then he had like bags, like these transparent like plastic bags full of prescription drugs.
Oh,
on top of it.
Yeah.
And then we noticed in the front seat there was a notebook, and in the notebook they wrote every mall on there that they hit from Chicago all the way to Texas.
Yeah. See, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you keep those? I mean, come on.
So we looked, and there was man, there had to be like 11
Yeah, that's crazy.
11 malls.
I'm sure some detective liked that though.
Yeah, they were like,
they got all right there. So.
right. So yeah, we pulled everything out. We had it all on the through the parking lot.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. It's crazy how people.
That is nuts.
From there, once you became chief of police, and you started noticing the growth. So what was the biggest, I would say, obstacle that you might have faced during that time?
Well, any change that occurs, takes a little time to do. And even though, I came from within and it was basically a product of my predecessor to a degree,
right.
I have a different style about me compared to him. And so I do things, a little differently than he is. Anybody is, whoever the new guy is going to do something different than the previous guy.
Right.
And trying to keep everybody and get everybody on board with that, is always a challenge, no matter, no matter whether they like you or they don't like you,
right.
It's still a challenge,
right.
And I was fortunate that we had good folks in place, good supervisors and good commanders in the line. Much of that didn't change, but I was able to, in the 11 years I was there, to make sure that promoting certain people along the way that I thought would give our department the best chance for success.
Right.
To deal with the growth and reaching out to the community and making sure that they have a voice in what's going on.
Right.
One thing my old chief taught me, Chief McFadden, is be careful about taking credit for reducing crime.
Right.
Because you're going to get blamed when it goes up.
Right.
And what he meant by that was that the whole community bears that burden.
Right.
It's not just the police department's responsibility
right.
to lower or deal with crime. It's all of our responsibility.
Right.
It's making sure we lock our doors and
right.
keep stuff out of sight,
right.
In the car, or lock your house doors. Right. I mean, it was amazing to me that in 2018, when I'm retiring, people still would leave their car unlocked.
Yeah.
They'd leave their house unlocked.
And there's some people just like run into a store. They'll leave their car running and the car unlocked.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
not doing some of the very basic things that any of us could do
Right.
to reduce crime.
Right.
So I just always was amazed by that.
Oh,
You know, as modern as we think we are,
Yeah.
you know, maybe we're not so modern after
Yeah.
all.
well, I think that part of it is people get comfortable.
They do.
They
Yeah.
get comfortable, and once they get comfortable with something, they start relaxing and not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny too. Over that time, especially when I was chief, you know, there would be, you know, a couple points of your uniform crime report would go up each year, you
Right.
know, and then there would be this, you know, groundswell of people concerned about crime
Right.
getting really bad. But then when you go back and you look historically at Louisville, we had crime that was just incredibly high back in the 80s.
Oh wow.
You know,
Mhm.
and when you do it and track it over a 20-year period,
Right.
generally speaking, our crime has gone down
Right.
quite significantly.
Oh well.
Now, what does increase from time to time is Part 1 crimes,
Mm.
and those are the ones that are the more violent. Those are like
Okay.
arson and rape and robbery and
Right.
murder, manslaughter, you know, theft. Believe it or not, larceny is a major Part 1 crime,
Mm.
but that's just like you left your lawnmower out in the front yard and somebody took it.
Right.
That's a theft. That's the same thing as, you know, somebody taking your $45,000 car.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's seen the same. It's just the value changes. So,
Right.
but so when people see that stuff kind of tick up, it always kind of concerns them
Right.
that, you know, all of a sudden we got all this crime. But historically, it's phenomenal that as big as we've gotten, that
Right.
crime hadn't exponentially increased. You would think it would.
Right.
You know, so I always tell people I have a theory about that, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I also believe that our community was aging more. I think we had fewer and fewer young families moving in.
Right.
You know, and those of us that are a little bit older, we put ourselves in less of jeopardy
Right.
as we age. You know, we
Right.
tend to be in before dark or at dark.
Right.
You know, nothing good happens after midnight.
Right.
Trust me, we've all heard that before. Our
Right.
dads told us that
Yeah,
all the
I
time.
keep telling my son that too.
Yeah, nothing good happens after midnight. That's
Yeah.
usually the case.
Yeah.
And so those of us, as we age and get older and more mature, you know, we don't put ourselves in a position to where we could become a victim of crime, especially violent crime.
Right.
So I think that's a lot of the reason why some of that stuff's kind of gone down. And I think the crime prevention efforts that law enforcement has made in general,
Right.
you know, it does sink into some people. You know, so some people do lock their houses and their car doors and,
Right.
you know, take their, you know, things out of the car so that it's not attractive for somebody to break the window and grab it.
Right.
So the more that we as a community do that, the better off we're going to be from a crime standpoint.
Right.
And, you know, it speaks to our quality of life. You know,
Right.
I mean, who wants to be worried about that kind of stuff, you know, on a Saturday when you ought to be at your kid's baseball game or
Right.
soccer game or whatever.
Right.
You know, the more that we kind of do that and watch out for each other, the better off we are.
Right. And that's what I was just thinking, when a city gets bigger, you would think there's more opportunity, to commit crimes, but as long as the majority of the people are vigilant, then now you have more eyes, watching you, so to keep you from doing something.
You're exactly right. There's no reason why we
Yeah.
can't expect that we'd be safer
Right.
because we have more people. You know,
Right.
that whole thing, safety in numbers.
Right.
You know, it's really true.
Yeah.
You know, it's way better to go with a crowd or a group
Right.
somewhere than to go individually by yourself. You know,
Right.
you're less vulnerable that way.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing with if we can get everybody to kind of watch out for each other.
Mhm.
You know, and technology has kind of helped that a little bit. I mean, not a day goes by when you look at Facebook that you don't see somebody reporting or talking about something weird that happened in the neighborhood.
Right.
Does anybody else know about it?
Yeah.
And there's that next door app where you can actually join your neighborhood.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like that virtual neighborhood watch program that's going
Right.
on.
Yeah.
So those are good things, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that Louisville has its own Facebook page too. In there,
Oh yeah,
everybody's on that always.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
One part of the job I don't miss
Right.
is being concerned about what's being
What's being said on
there.
there? Yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine all the stuff that you've probably seen on, on the Facebook.
Oh yeah. Well, it's everything from, you know, rumor, you know, to somebody heard part of the story, and so, you know, their imagination runs away with them, and all of a sudden you've got this big thing blowing up that's really
Right.
nothing, you know, that just a little, you know, factual information, you know, will set it straight.
Yeah.
And that's what we tried to do while I was there. Is,
Yeah.
you know, where we could, if we could get behind something and say, no, here's what happened. You know, so that, you know, especially when people are concerned about kids' safety and that kind of thing. Well, we always wanted to make sure we were out in front of that and, you know, set the record straight so people knew what the actual facts were.
Right.
And, you know, when dealing with the actual information, it's a little bit easier for people to handle.
Right. And I noticed that too. Whenever Facebook start getting, you know, they get a hold of a story and they all start running. And everybody's got their part of the story.
Yes.
I noticed that not long after that happens, that the Louisville Police Department put out some kind of press release on. And just say, hey, look, this is what happened. And,
they're very well in tune with all that stuff, and they know, you know, how that stuff can just run rampant. And so well, I mean, you know, you try to get as in front of it as quick as you can, you know, and just make sure that the actual story gets out there, the facts. You know, there's still maybe cause for alarm, but at least everybody is operating on the same set of facts that everybody else is. And we're not chasing rabbits, you know, in the form of rumors and, you know, other erroneous stories that are going on out there.
So, so if, you know, you could sit down with, you know, a young chief of police or even a young you could talk to you 10 years from now. What's the biggest advice that you would give?
You know, really, I would tell myself to get out in the community even more. I tried to really do that, and that's sort of the way I was trained, you know, from Chief McFadden, is to, you know, be involved in the community. And I tried to do that at every chance that I could, but, you know, I would say do it even more than you think that you're doing. You know, attend every public event that you possibly can. You know, have any kind of, you know, town hall style forum that you can to promote the good dialogue between us and the community. And probably more especially with those parts of the community that don't trust us. You know, we tried to make sure that we had a good dialogue with members of the minority community to make sure that they had a voice in our policing style. And, you know, we probably needed to do more of that than we did. So that's the advice I'd give myself is, you know, even when you think you're doing plenty, you need to double that.
You know, one of the things that you guys did that really opened my eyes to what you guys do is Coffee with Cops.
I think that was a very successful program. You know, the police departments around the country were doing that. You know, it's a great way to open that dialogue up with the community and, you know, giving people a chance to come approach us, you know, one-on-one as people. You know, it can be imposing, I suppose, when you're trying to talk to somebody in the police uniform because all the junk we carry and everything. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're still just people like you are, you know, so it's important for us to listen to what people have to say about what's going on in their community so that we can craft better solutions for those issues.
You know Winston Edmonton?
Winston, yes, I do.
So Winston actually invited me to it. So I went with him, and one of the things that you know that I really liked about it is being able to go through some of the simulators that you guys had. And you know, every time somebody tells me, you know, talks to me about, especially like it's about police shooting, you know, I tell them go through a program like that, where you're actually, you know, in that simulator and you're actually facing that situation. And I want to see how you respond to it. You know, because you know, one of the funny things about that is that when I went, there was probably, I don't know, 20, 30 people, you know, in our group. And every single person in that scenario, well, it didn't matter what scenario that they had, every single person already had their gun drawn. Like ready to respond. You know, but yeah, you know, when a situation happens, you know,
it's not what's expected. Police.
So you know, police's gun is holstered. You know, until you know that they feel that there's a threat. You know, but every single person, you know, if people are like, oh, the same people saying that you know, I don't understand why the cop had his gun drawn or whatever. You know, but I put you in that situation. The very first thing you're gonna do is have your gun drawn. I mean, there can be quite a disconnect between what the public expects that we should do or believes that we should do and what we actually can do. You know, it's not like you see on movies or TV shows. You know, we can't shoot the gun out of your hand, you know, or it's very unlikely that we're going to do that. If it happened, Right.
It's probably a mistake.
Yeah.
Probably aiming for something else, you know.
Right.
But so that doesn't really happen like it happens in the movies. You know, putting themselves in that situation, like in the simulators or joining programs like the Citizen Police Academies.
Right.
Man, what a great eye opener for most citizens to see exactly what it is that a police officer goes through, both physically and mentally.
Right.
You know, the job's pretty tough on a cop, especially the guys that are in patrol. Mm-hmm. You know, the kind of situations that they face every day. You know, some of them are absolutely very life-threatening, and they have to deal with that every day.
Right.
You know, the traffic stop is probably one of the most dangerous things that a police officer does.
Right.
And then responding to a family disturbance, you know, probably the other most, dangerous situation that we encounter. And so, you know, mentally you have to be prepared to deal with that, and physically you have to be prepared to respond when you need to. Right. And I don't know about you, but, you know, especially as you get older, your reactions are a little bit slower, you know. Yeah. And so it's it's one of those commodities that kind of you can age yourself out of that responsibility. Right. And you know, it could put you at risk. It could put the community at risk. Right. You know, so that's something that constantly police departments have to deal with too. Is how do they keep, you know, fresh people, you know, on the road all the time, and keep the training, you know, up for everybody.
You know, and one of the things I was thinking about when I was running that scenario, that's an added pressure, is, you know, as I was going through the scenario, it was a guy who had like a crowbar, and he was like trying to get into the car, and you're trying to figure out if he's breaking into it, his car. But the whole thing that was going in the back of my mind was, you know, in a real life situation like that, you might have somebody with a cell phone filming you the whole time to see.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, so that puts extra pressure on the officer. You know. Because they know if I make a mistake on this and I react, you know,
everybody's gonna know.
Yeah, it's it's gonna go public.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah, no question. That's just another thing that a police officer has to keep in mind. You know, when they're trying to perform their duty, is that there's a different point of view somebody's filming. Right. That can come back to haunt you later. You know, depending on what it is that. Whatever kind of outcome of that scenario happens, right? And it could be a little bearing on you, you know. Yeah. So.
And I remember how just and this thing is like, you have to understand the scenario is just like these big 3 screens. It's like
I know.
The half circle. So when I was doing it, I was trying to make the decision. So I'm thinking, I don't want to shoot this guy if he's unarmed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And if he is armed, I don't want to get shot, so I want to make sure I'm ready for him. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, if I mess up, there's probably somebody watching me. And then when it was over with, my adrenaline was like, high. I was like, my hands were shaking, and I was like, it's this is like TV screens. But when you put yourself in that situation and you walk away from it, I was like, wow, this is, I'm like, first of all, I was like, why am I shaking so? It was just it's not a real situation.
I know. Yeah. When people, review, situations like that, incidents that police are involved in, and they wonder why the bad guy is able to shoot so well, and the police officer maybe will fire several shots, but only gets, only hits maybe once. Right. The accuracy of a police officer when they're under fire, or under pressure to return fire, their accuracy percentage is very low. Oh, wow. It's because of that adrenaline rush. Yeah. The bad guy probably knows what he or she is going to do. Right. So they're not under nearly the pressure that the police officer is having to deal with that threat. Right. And even the crowbar thing that you're talking about, could somebody kill you with a crowbar? Yeah. Absolutely, they could. Right. So does that become a deadly force sort of a scenario? Right. Potentially it does. It depends on what that person does with the crowbar. Yeah. How threatening they become, or do they follow your commands to, to stop whatever it is. And that's the issue I was going to bring up too, is like you're shouting out these commands and the person's ignoring you. If you want to defuse a situation, all you have to do is comply. That's it. That's exactly right. You could defuse that whole situation just by complying. I agree. Even if you think that the police officer is doing something incorrect or not according to protocol or against policy or whatever it is, you can argue that later. Right. But comply with what they're asking you to do right then.
Right.
And that's the better way to deal with it, in my opinion, anyway. So many times we see where people fail to comply, and
Right.
they want to argue, and they want to fight, and they want to struggle with the police.
Right.
And we're trained to win that situation.
Right. Right.
Use whatever force is necessary to overturn what force that we're encountering.
Right.
And we're going to win. We've got the tools. We've been trained how to do that. And so I always tell the public, man, just comply with what the officer says to do.
Right.
Live to argue about it later on.
Right.
Don't do something that, somebody's going to regret later on.
Yeah. And, a lot of them argue that, there's a cover up, the wall blew, whatever.
Oh, sure.
But I think that that's harder now with all the technology that's out there.
Yeah.
So if,
body cams.
Yeah, exactly.
All that sort of stuff.
You got the body cams, you got people with their, people with their cell phones. So, eventually the truth's going to come out.
Of course, yeah.
So, like you said, instead of arguing with them, if they just comply.
Just comply. Yeah.
And then you could take all that later. You could go pull body cam footage. You could pull whatever if you think that if the officer was in the wrong. But the ideal is to both of you go home at the end of the day.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Just comply. It's just a whole lot safer for everybody.
Right.
Pure and simple.
Wow.
Yeah, the body cams, I think, there was some apprehension, I think, when those first came on, law enforcement agencies started doing those. But I can tell you that from experience that it more often than not, demonstrates that the police officer did exactly what they were trained to do.
Right.
They followed protocol, and they didn't do anything inappropriate.
Right.
So it, kind of vindicates their action far more than it proves them doing something, incorrect or wrong.
And that's the other thing too. I believe in the body cam, and I'm actually the CEO of a tech company that's building a body cam right now.
Okay.
So, and the reason I believe in it is because even if you have that rogue, police officer, once that body cam's on and they know they're being watched, that alters their behavior.
Absolutely does. Yeah. And I think to a degree, people that we encounter, when they know we have the body cam going, they actually act a little differently than maybe they would have had they not had a body camera, recording what they're saying and doing. Right. Yeah.
And that's what I tell people all the time, with the body cam doesn't choose what the truth is.
No.
You know what I mean?
The truth is what it is.
Right. And sometimes it'll fall one way, sometimes it's going to fall the other way.
Absolutely.
But, the good thing about it is it's indisputable. You know what I mean?
Pretty much, yeah.
So,
although I will say this, and even with before body cam, when people would just show up with a video camera or smartphone, and record things, I try to remind people too, it's still a two-dimensional image. You don't get the same depth of field that a person gets. You don't see things in your peripheral on the camera that you do in real time. And so there are other factors that are going on when that incident occurred that's being recorded than just what's on the film. So the film doesn't always tell everything. But it does tell most stuff.
Yeah, because the field of view on that camera is pretty limited.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And I know that guys like me are trying to figure out a way to expand that field.
Well, yeah, I mean, you want to get as much of the real, the real thing as you possibly can. So no doubt that technology will continue to evolve and get just better and better. More information's better. I mean, we need the Star Trek cameras.
Yeah.
Remember how you used to, no matter where they were.
Yeah.
They've got a view from every angle that you can possibly get. Well, that's what we sort of need. And I don't know, if that'll ever be invented or not, but that's kind of what you'd like to have.
Yeah. So off camera, I'm going to tell you my solution for that.
Okay.
So, so what are you working on now? So
well, my wife and I had a grand plan of when we both retired, we wanted to travel more, and so we've done a lot of that. The only hiccup has been COVID. We're grounded for a couple of years there. And, couldn't really travel anymore, but we've, since things have loosened up, we've gotten back to doing that. And we just did a river cruise over in Europe back in April, early May. And then we take a few little trips here and there and everything. And fortunately, we have grandkids that are real close, so we get a chance to see those guys and hang out with them. And being retired, gives us just a lot more flexibility and time
Right.
to do things we enjoy. You
Right.
know, I played in the high school band when I was in high school at Louisville,
Okay.
and I still play the tuba.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, and about 4 years ago, we had a little community band that kind of started.
Right.
And once again, the pandemic kind of threw a little hitch in that get along.
Mhm.
But we've just gotten back to rehearsing again, and hopefully we'll play a few things this year, maybe this summer and into the fall. But it's kind of a chance to do something from my youth
Right.
that I really enjoy doing, and now I
Right.
have time to do that.
Right.
So
So, and that's a good thing too about being, retired after, such a long career in law enforcement.
yeah,
Now you can just sit back, let the new chief run the place, and
absolutely.
just relax and go on vacation. And
It's his ship now, so he
Right.
can set sail and do what you want to do.
Well, cool. So, what do you see for the future for law enforcement?
Well, I think obviously retention and being able to bring more folks into the business is going to be
Right.
huge. So there's such, especially in North Texas, there's such competition
Right.
among all the local police departments to get the very best candidates that you can possibly get.
Right.
And you don't really know this unless you travel some,
Mhm.
but around the country, we're pretty well known in the North Texas area of having some of the better trained, better organized police departments in throughout the country.
Okay.
We have a thing called the Texas Best Practices Program that the Texas Police Chiefs Association sponsored.
Right.
And so it's a list of, when I last left, it was 150 some odd
Oh wow.
standards that you had to be able to meet in order to be considered a recognized agency.
Okay.
And you would get graded by former police chiefs who worked for the foundation that would come in, and they would actually look and review your policies, and you had to demonstrate proof that you did what your policy said to do.
Right.
And then they would go and look at your property room, your jail, if you ran one, your facilities, they would review all that stuff
Right.
and make a determination about whether you meet all those standards or not.
Wow.
And once you do, then you become recognized. And of course, there's a fee attached to that.
Right.
And I started that whenever I became chief, because even though I thought we were a very well-run department, I knew there would be some things where we'd go, oh, we don't really do that quite as well as we think we do.
Right.
And that a program like this would reveal that and just make us better.
Right.
And so we got recognized first, I think, back in 2008, and then it's good for 4 years, and when you redo it, I think we're on the third one whenever I left. So,
Wow.
and hopefully it's something they'll continue to do.
Right.
But it helps to make, it should help give the community some sense of, we're trying to demonstrate to you that we do things in the right way as much as we possibly can.
Right. Right.
And so I was very proud of that being a program that we were able to participate in under my watch anyway.
Right.
And so that's a good thing. But, getting back to, how do we differentiate ourselves among all the other departments in the area?
Right.
It's going to be tough to do that, and to do that for the future. And I think you said it earlier in the interview that, what better way to make sure that you improve your community and that everybody has a voice than for somebody in the community to join the police department to help make those changes.
Right.
If you perceive that there's a change out there that's needed,
Right.
that's the way to do it.
Right.
Join up and, make a difference.
Yeah. Be the change you want to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would hope that people won't shy away from the profession just because of some of the defund police and
Right.
some of the negative things that you see in the media all the time.
Yeah.
We still need people to come and join the police department and be that voice of change for our communities.
Yeah.
Especially coming in at a young age. I was lucky that I was pretty young when I started.
Right.
So we need that young influx of recruits to come in
Right.
and be the police department, and then grow into someday being the chief of police too, if
Right.
they want to. Yeah, we need more people from the communities that we are policing,
Right.
and people that actually live there or that are from there.
Right.
And that will be a challenge in the future, I think, for police departments to be able to try to do that.
Right.
Because people are mobile, they move around a lot, and most people who rent move every 2 or 3 years,
Right.
And so there will be difficulty in trying to get that sort of an individual attracted to a police department.
Yeah.
So they'll have to figure out a way to incentivize, new cadets to join the department.
Right.
But I think it will pay off in the long run.
Right.
At least it worked out well for me.
Right.
I never had a problem with, I would certainly encounter people I went to school with or that I knew, from the neighborhood and whatever. It was never a problem for me.
Right.
And so I never understood that when some officers would tell me they didn't want to live where they police for fear of running into people that they arrested or that they know or that kind of thing. Well, I tell you, in 40 years, it wasn't a big deal for me.
Right.
I've always been listed in the phone book. Never worried about anybody
Someone showing up to your house,
come to the house uninvited or anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
I would think it'd be a dumb idea to go to the chief of police's house anyways to arrest.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Definitely hope so.
One of the things I was thinking too is that all these people talking about defunding the police.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's not the answer. Defunding the police is not. That's why one of the reasons I started the company is to help provide better training and more technology.
Yes. Yeah.
For the departments to be able to use. So part of like what we're trying to create is tools that will allow chief of police to vet officers who come in to see if they're actually somebody that they would want to hire.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that background investigation is so key to having the right people.
Right.
And everybody, because of the standards in Texas, were required to have a psychological exam done on all their candidates.
Right.
I know in Louisville, we actually required more than the state's minimum.
Right.
To try to make sure that we got the right individuals that had the kind of self-control and maturity to be able to handle the situations that they're going to encounter.
Right.
And make the very best decisions that they can. I think it's helped us kind of stay out of the news for the most part for inflammatory sorts of things that involve police.
Right.
So I think you've always got to continue to work on good standards. The answer to competing with other departments for people and retaining them is not to lower standards by any means.
Right.
If anybody's listening to me out there that's thinking about police work, you want there to be the highest possible standards there are, so that we can all be held to a different standard, a different level. Right. And that's going to make all of us safer in the long run.
But, and then, the other thing I think that helps too, and you mentioned several times, is for the officers being out in the community.
Absolutely.
Just, in special events where the community's not just seeing you when you get pulled over.
Right.
You're actually
they need to see you other times as well.
Right.
Yeah. You just got to know your beat. You got to know who's there and who belongs, who doesn't belong. Right. That kind of stuff. And you're right. It's the way to avoid those surprises. When somebody does get pulled over, or you show up at their house because their music's too loud or whatever it is. Right. It's way better if it's a friend that coming to you versus somebody that you don't know.
And that's one of the reasons too that I wish they would just like the Coffee with Cops.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great program. I think that if the department would do that like once a month,
sure,
and have the community come in, and not only does that give them a chance to meet the officers, but to be able to go through some of the training that the officers go through.
Oh yeah. I know one things that we did too was I had gone back through some old city minutes, council meeting minutes, right, and actually discovered the day that in April that I forget what year now. The memory goes when but we figured out when our birthday was as a police department, and so we used to have an open house. Oh, wow. We would do one evening. We'd have just block off an area of the parking lot, so that it's very pedestrian friendly, and we'd have some of our tools and things out there that people could see, and they can go through the SWAT truck if they want to. They can put on a vest and see how heavy it is. All that sort of stuff. And I think that's the other thing too to help promote, getting to know your community and getting them to get to know you better. Right.
And even like you guys are right across the street from Louisville High School, so you could even have a big event in the parking lot.
We do lots of things with the high school. Yeah.
And so, and I think that would be another way to attract the younger generation.
Absolutely. You just want to see that.
Right.
We have through the Boy Scouts, we have a police explorer post.
Yeah.
And I think most agencies in the North Texas area do something similar.
Right.
You know, and so it's a group of young people that are, you know, maybe interested in that as a profession. You
Right.
know. And we have lots of jobs at the police department besides being a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
We have jail staff that aren't policemen, you know, police people.
Right.
We have clerical staff. We have police dispatchers,
Right.
which is in great need in all agencies. Everybody is short
Right.
police dispatchers, and that's a great way to also give back to your community.
Right.
So those jobs are all available out there, guys, and you know, I know that the police department would love you guys to consider joining us. It's a good department. You know, I'm obviously a big believer in that. It's been good to me for 40 years, and I hope that you'll consider that as a possible career.
Definitely. And you know, talk about the police dispatchers. I mean, I know that Chief Hamilton and Grapevine was going through the same thing with, you know,
Yep.
they were so shorthanded that off-duty police officers were actually having to go in and fill the positions. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. You know, it's going to continue to be that.
Yeah.
For a while.
What do you think would help get more people to be interested in the dispatch position?
I think if they came in and saw what dispatchers did,
right?
You know, if they had a chance to come in, and in fact, I would really encourage people that are thinking about doing something like that.
Right.
First thing, just go in and sit in for a couple hours. You know,
right.
Especially on a busy night, and just see what all they do, and
right.
you know what kind of expertise that it takes to be a dispatcher. Mm-hmm. You really that's really the lifeblood when somebody makes that 911 call.
Right.
To get a very well trained police dispatcher on the phone.
Right.
Who can talk you through most medical emergencies.
Right.
And get you police response, get you medical response.
Right.
The fire department is, you know, we have a combined dispatch center in Louisville.
Right.
And a lot of agencies do something similar where it's one place you call to get all of those services, you know. Wow. Yeah. So, but yeah, I would definitely recommend somebody sit in and see what it's like just to make sure it's the right kind of job for you.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and speaking of that too, you know, a lot of people think that just, you know, being in the police department is just throwing on the uniform, be on the street, and some of them are worried about, you know, that.
Sure.
But there's so many other opportunities within.
Oh, absolutely.
The police force that, you know, where you're not necessarily interacting with the public or face to face. Like dispatchers, you're still interacting with the public, but it's not face to face.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, and someday it will be.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt in my mind that someday you'll be making video calls to the dispatcher. You know,
right.
So you will have some sort of face to face with those guys.
Right.
But yeah, there's all kinds of opportunities. We have civilian forensic folks. Mm-hmm. You know that you can do that. You know, it's funny when I talk to people who really, you know, especially young people who are wanting to be a police officer.
Right.
Everybody wants to come in and be the detective.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It doesn't really happen that way.
Right.
You got to kind of start at the bottom. You know, you're gonna. Yeah. We always believed at Louisville, and I still believe this, that you really you make it or break it by being a police officer on patrol.
Right.
You know, answering those calls for service every day. That's where you
right.
build your basically the experience that you're going to draw upon.
Right.
In other jobs down the road, if you end up being a police officer for any length of time.
Right.
You're not going to become a detective until
right.
you've done that job.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, you know, there's lots of different opportunities out there that people can look into. You only have to be 18 to be a jailer, so you don't have to be 21 like you have to be for a police officer to be
right.
An actual police officer.
Right.
So it's the same way with with dispatch.
Okay.
So you can do all those jobs at 18, and it's, you know, it's a great opportunity, a great career.
Right.
You know, it's very rewarding. You know, it's not without its challenges. There'll be some tough days that
right.
You know, tough things that you'll have to experience and go through, but it's very rewarding at the end.
Right. Well, cool. Yeah. So anybody who's, you know, thinking about this field, definitely,
Absolutely.
You know, explore all the opportunities.
Tell them I sent you.
So, all right, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, man. You know, we learned a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, I always enjoy sitting down and you know, talking to the different chief of police, because everybody's got their unique stories, especially where you know, the cities that they grow up in. So
certainly.
Our police, not just necessarily grow up in, but the the police. But,
well, you know, a chief of police has a unique perspective on police work because we have to see it both from the police officer side and from the community side. You know, so it puts us in a unique position to try to, you know, straddle both worlds, you know, and make the right decisions for our department and our community. You know, it's not always an easy thing, and you know, it's not for everybody. You know? If you know, people ask me how do you manage to keep any sanity at all? Well, you know, assuming that there is any sanity to my life anyway. If it were not for my belief in God, my family. You know, my wife and I just celebrated 40 years of marriage.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Almost unheard of in law enforcement. Most everybody's had 2 or 3 wives, you know, sometimes, and you know, I've been fortunate that we've had a strong relationship over those 40 years, and you know, you know, she helps keep me grounded, you know, and my family helps keep me grounded. So, if I maintain any sanity at all, it's due to them.
Well, cool, man. All right, well, I appreciate it so much.
You bet. I enjoyed it very much.
All right, guys. So until next show, the next episode, remember you are uniquely designed with a purpose, and always keep moving forward. Peace.